And good evening and welcome to City Focus. I'm Marty Olsen, your host, and I'm delighted to welcome back my friend and yours, Juan, who's the former football coach at New London High, currently working there as a job coach. And Coach, welcome.
Thanks for having me again.
And always enjoy having you in. We always have I think, an engaging and interesting conversation on whatever topics we opt to take up. So let's see where our Freeform Wednesday takes us tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I have absolutely no idea, so I'm all yours. I'm your muse.
Well, I see you got your Yale crew hat on here.
Yes.
So I would expect you with a Yale football here, but...
Well, you know, I wore this purposely, besides the fact it matched what I was wearing today, but I wore it purposely because I wanted to talk about crew. Because a good buddy of mine, Nick Keppel out of Stonington, great guy, just gracious could be, always offering to help. And I'm talking about New London kids, who he has no real tie to. When I became the head coach, he calls me up and he's like, hey, I have season tickets to BC, and I'd be willing to take 2 players and a chaperone to these home games. You're gonna do that for me? You know, I knew Nick as a probation officer. He's an attorney, but it wasn't like we ever went out to lunch or anything like that. So it was just so generous of him to do so. And what ended up happening was, you know, I couldn't send varsity guys because we had film, lift, run day after a game. I couldn't send JV guys because they had a game. So we would send 2 freshmen and a chaperone. And at the time, it was perfect timing. Our freshmen got to go to these BC games. AJ's playing, Dylan's playing. So they got to see a New London kid playing, you know, at his home games. It just was unbelievable. But bringing Nick all this up is because Nick, he just continues to offer things to help kids out, and New London kids. And one of the things he mentioned to me is that Stonington is going to have eventually a boathouse, and they would love to have a co-op with New London.
Ah.
So if we can get a crew team going, that would be phenomenal. And I got this hat from Steve Gladstone, who
He
is
just retired. He was
yes,
the
just
head
retired
crew coach at Yale.
at Yale, and a legend in
He
the
turned the
sport of
program
crew.
around. I mean, they were getting a spank when Parker was coaching up at Harvard. And
Right. And
Parker
so
retired, Gladstone came in, and Yale's been winning this thing
and
year
he's
in and year out.
Olympians, everything. You know, I mean, like he's literally a legend in the sport. And so his daughter's boyfriend graduated with major from Yale. And so we were at, the graduation party together, and we got to talking, and I shared my passion of evangelism with him, and he taught me about some, crew stuff, and he gave me this hat. So I don't wear it much, but I wore it today because I didn't want to forget to mention that we have an opportunity perhaps to get a crew co-op going with Stonington. And what people don't understand is scholarships available, especially the young ladies.
They can be the
and crew.
Cox.
Yes, but I mean, even just in the women's crew team.
Yep.
A young lady from Stonington, I think she played basketball, tennis, some other stuff. She decided that she kind of got talked into just getting on the rowing machine, the erg is what they call it. And she gets on there and she posts a time so impressive, she got a scholarship to Michigan. She had never touched the water and got a scholarship to Michigan. And, I'm always thinking, what can we do for New London kids to help them get ahead?
Another new opportunity.
Exactly. And something that people don't think about. So since I knew we didn't have any set agenda, I wanted to make sure I mentioned that.
Well, I think it's a good one to hit off with, especially we're on the river. Here
Yes.
we've got the oldest intercollegiate athletic event with the Yale Harvard Regatta on the Thames River.
Yes.
And why doesn't New London have a crew team?
Exactly. And again, I understand it's expensive. That's why it's so amazing that if we did get a chance to do this co-op, they are really helping us out greatly. And we just need to supply some young athletes, and I can get more details from Nick. I had mentioned it to one person with the Board of Ed, but that person left, so I haven't had a chance to discuss with anyone else. But hopefully the powers that will take advantage of any opportunity we have.
Yeah, I mean, and crew is a very, very challenging sport. I mean, it is hard work, and the teamwork that's got to go in there, and the precision, it's really something. I mean, have you seen the movie The Boys in the Boat?
I didn't see that movie yet, but I was going to say that I did see the documentary about, and I can't remember the name of it now, but the team from Chicago. And these were some rival gang members who ended up being on the same boat. And it bridged gaps, and it helped these kids end up going to college. And they did so much for the kids. They weren't national champions, but they were part of a team, and they became something bigger than themselves. And that's what it's all about.
No, I mean it's really something. And if you get a chance, a friend of mine shared the book The Boys in the Boat, which I read, and then that was a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And then the movie came out, and I took in the movie. Which is very, very good in relation to the book. Sometimes the book and a movie can be very divergent. But
Right.
This was they told the line pretty well, and didn't take too many liberties. Let's put it that way.
That's great. Yeah, I was supposed to go see it with my two godsons, Casey Corcoran and Nico Ramos, and we went to Mr. G's first and sat down, started eating, laughing, joking, and next thing you know, it was like, you know what, it's kind of snowing out. We ended up staying there eating. We didn't go to the movie.
But well, that's terrific. I hope that this materializes. This is really a pleasant surprise for me to hear this news. If we can pull that off, and for the boys and the girls, but for the now you're of a stature that you would be great in a crew boat. You're tall and big. I mean, these crew guys are big young men.
My kids would have been
Even
much better. Yeah. You know, I mean,
you're 6'5", 6'6",
right,
big,
with
big
a
kids.
7-foot wingspan, you know, and stuff like that. They would have been phenomenal in the boat. But, you know, it's just one of those deals that whatever it is that helps you get an education. I was fortunate in the fact that I had to learn the hard lesson, but I did learn it. That's why I'm fortunate. You know, I went from being state champion in high school, going to college and going 9-1 and playing in the ECAC playoff game. But then I was out of school for 3 semesters because of finances. And when I went back, I was trading football for an education. I didn't let football use me. I used football to get an education. It worked out well because I had a good career at Central, but I have a master's degree now. That's something I never even fathomed. You know, quite honestly, I wouldn't have gone to college if I didn't play sports because I wasn't even thinking about that. My parents were just, you know, working poor people who said, don't, you know, do drugs, don't get in trouble, don't get arrested. They were good moral people, but they weren't like, you got to go to college. And I remember getting my first recruiting letter from Hobart College. And it was like my junior year, and I'm like, you can go to college and play football? You know, and so taking advantage of that was huge for me. And I just want to see kids take advantage.
Well, I think that, and that's part of because you've now coached, I mean, a coach's responsibility is to try to find that path for your players, not just during football season, but in life.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more, but I know there are some coaches who don't believe that's their job. There are coaches who will tell you, hey, I don't get involved in that. I heard a coach say, if you want help in going to school, let me know. You know, I know that when I was head coach, I had kids who I thought could play at certain levels, and when those schools came in to visit, I had those kids down in the office to meet them, and I had their transcripts ready. And I remember one kid finally saying to me, Coach, I don't want to play college football. And I'm like, okay, now that I know that, I won't call you down. But I just think that I know what it did for me, so I would like to see that happen for others. And even as an assistant coach, you know, if I could be the go-between, and even after I was done coaching, you know, there were still coaches who would call me up and ask, you know, my opinions, things of that nature. I would always do that. I just think that, you know, someone helped me. You know, Charles Johnson, he's passed away since, but he helped me out. And if I can help someone out, now you got to do the legwork, you know. if we help you get into a school, stay there. We had a couple kids who went to visit schools and didn't follow through, or actually were enrolled in schools, didn't follow through. That's one of my, real pet peeves right now, is that New London athletes are great front runners. We've got to find that intestinal fortitude that when things aren't going our way, to just stay the course. Because you know what? You're going to come out the other side if you do what you're supposed to do, what you need to do. And I say that being a New Londoner. I'm not saying that from the outside. I'm saying that from being here my whole life. We can, pound our chest with the best of them. I just might have hit my mic there. But sometimes, in my last game that I coached, we were down, 22-0 in the third quarter. And when we came back and we won that game, and I remember just telling those guys, this is what your life is going to be like sometimes. You're going to be down, but you keep battling, you keep scrapping. And you know what? And you're not always going to win. But if you do what you're supposed to do, you'll be all right. You can live with your outcome versus saying, hey, it was, someone else's fault or blaming the world. And I just remember when I was talking to the team, it was really emotional, but the cheerleaders were crying because these cheerleaders live in that same world. They have the same, dynamics. They have the same things at home. I remember not, having a ton of money growing up and just got to stay the course. I thank God that my mom and dad stayed the course. My dad did everything from being a union painter, but when he got laid off, he would rake leaves. He would do whatever he had to do to, pay the bills and never breaking the law, wouldn't even take state assistance. They offered it to us because I was very sick as a child. He says, I'm healthy, I'll take care of it. And my parents had huge medical bills because I had a lot of asthma problems as a kid. But, that's why in my Hall of Fame induction at New London High School, I'm like, they're inducting me to a Hall of Fame because I played football well. But my parents are Hall of Famers, and
that's one of the things that I've had an opportunity to occasionally address the young athletes at New London, different sports at different times,
Mm-hmm.
through my being involved in government.
Mm-hmm.
And to remind everybody and to give the parents a round of applause, because without the support, you're not going to get where you are. You can't do that alone. You need somebody who's going to guide you and mentor you, and from time to time discipline you when you step out of bounds. And we all make mistakes, and rein you in so that you can meet those goals and objectives. And you're a shining star. I mean, now you've been a player coming from a poor background, as you've outlined, but you've went to school, went to college, made it through. As a matter of fact, you had an initial setback. You went to Norwich University.
Yes, I did.
And due to finances, you stepped back, right?
Mm-hmm.
And were able to get into Central. And you played there, parlayed that. You've gotten work, you've gotten your master's, married, family, and your children have been athletes. And you've had a chance to watch them, coach them. You've been a coach and observe things at many, many different levels is what I'm driving at. Mm. And how things work out and where things are. I suspect that one of my notes here is, the difference between coaching at the college level versus the high school. Right. You've watched your young men play at Yale for Tony Reno, right?
Yeah.
And he's had, as a coach, pretty good success down there.
So far, so good, yes.
And what are they doing there? At the college level, and there's a school too where the academic challenges are significant. These kids aren't going down there to play football with an eye on an NFL. If that happens, it's kind of gravy, but it's certainly not where they start. as a freshman. If you're eyeing the NFL, you're probably looking at Michigan State or
Right.
Penn State or some Alabama, some school of that nature. You're not going to an Ivy League school.
Well, that's true, and it's interesting because, as you said, the difference in coaching college versus high school, I think this is why a lot of high school coaches are struggling now, because it's getting similar. And what I mean by that is, and we talked about this the other day, nowadays these kids can go wherever they want to go to high school. And if they don't want to stay in high school, they go to prep school. They're savvy now. People don't want to call it recruiting, call it whatever it is, but I live with my grandma here, or, I go to a school of choice, and, New London's a school of choice. And so I've seen it where, a kid can live in another town, but he comes to New London if he gets to the magnet school, which is great. I will say the magnet school is phenomenal academically, and, it's just, I'm impressed with it. My oldest, Hunter, was a New London High School student, but my younger two, Major and Spencer, went to the magnet school. And I was just the STEM school, and I was watching these senior projects, and I'm just blown away. And I think that those senior projects should be played whenever there's not a show on public access, just so they can see what these kids are doing and how impressive it is. And I remember seeing some of my former players when I was head coach doing their senior projects, and I'm like, this dope. The kid that I see every day at practice is making this presentation. It's incredible. But so it's a lot going on, but as I said, it's getting so similar because these kids now, hey, if I don't like the coach, I'll go somewhere else. If as we said, when you could look at a kid, I remember in Little League, you knew, these are New London kids, and they're going to be playing in New London for the next X amount of years. And this team will grow up together, and if you get a good bunch of kids, you knew you were going to be successful. And that doesn't happen anymore. Even now, in the landscape of, and I just use basketball as an example. If you look at quote unquote New London kids that are at New London, at St. Bernard's, at Fitch, how great would that team be right now? Now, I know some kids maybe wouldn't play as much. People want all their kids to play as much as possible. But again, if it was just New London kids at New London, but again, you can say the same thing in reverse, some kids who've come here. But I just see that the landscape has changed so much that the old days of your coach doesn't really talk to you. He talks to you when double session starts, and after the last game of the season, he doesn't talk to you again until the summertime. These kids now want relationships. They want to, it's funny, I know even as a coach myself, the kid could be a pain in the behind all day, but then at the end of practice, he wants to walk up and shake your hand. And it's like, really? But that's just the way it is. They want to, I guess, feel a little different, and that's why I don't think it's an accident. Saban, all of a sudden I'm done. Because NILs and all that. And now in high school you can get NILs. So it has changed the landscape.
And
that's crazy.
Is that healthy, the name, image, likeness, NIL? In a broad sense, collegiately, and then having it trickling down into high school, and I suspect it may even be, if it's not there already, into junior high, middle school.
Well, you know what? I say this. I could be the traditionalist and say, I don't like it. I don't like the transfer portal. I like this and that. But coaches can go wherever they want to go, when they want to go.
And they do.
And they do. And they will go for more money. The guy at Washington is playing in the national championship game. And the next thing you know, playing in the national championship game. But then the next thing you know, he leaves. Because there was a prettier girl called Alabama. So I don't have a problem with it per se, but I think people really appreciate who has the leverage. Arch Manning didn't start a game last year, made millions of dollars at NIL. And that's just one example. So all of a sudden, a kid maybe doesn't even need to go pro. If I stay in college, Becker at UConn, Becker, I'm coming back for another year. And she's probably going to make more money than, most players in the WNBA.
Well, yeah, she may make more money than the team salary cap for the entire squad.
And I'm sure she probably knew she's going to be making a decent amount of money by staying. I don't think it was just an emotional decision. Oh, I'm staying.
Or altruistic.
Yeah.
Hail, hail, the Huskies.
Yeah. So, you know, I mean, it helps the kid. And again, maybe it helps the kid stay in school longer and get a degree because now I can help my family. You always hear these kids say, I'm going pro to help my family. Well, now if I'm making this much money, I can help my family now. I think the ugly part of all this, and I know it sounds nuts, I think it's the parents. Because the parents are just out of their minds. You know,
Is it living vicariously through their children?
Yes, you know, and just, you know, looking at their kids as a paycheck. You know, hey, I mean, there's a lot of pressure put on a lot of kids at an early age. And I just remember myself, I'm speaking Juan Roman, being very angry at a Little League baseball game. You know, we had a volunteer umpire whose strike zone kept getting wider and wider as the game got longer. And, you know, there's a kid up. I don't even know if it was my own kid. I think it was another kid. But it was clearly like the ball was almost over his head and they called it a strike. So, no, it was my kid. And I was, you know, chirping at him. So after the game, he goes, well, when your kid's playing for the Yankees, let me know. And it's like, that's not the point, dude. The kids are playing this game. Let them play it. You know, I'm sorry if you have a date or whatever it is. Let them play the game. You know, I think the purity, it means a lot to me. I want to see it happen. So that bothers me that we're losing a lot of purity between, you know, performance-enhancing drugs, some gambling stuff. Because I'll tell you right now, I've seen officiating at every level that's real shaky. And it tells me check bank accounts. And especially when it's the same people making the same bad calls all the time. You know, and then, oh yeah, we should have called that. Oh yeah. But there's no repercussion for that. Game's over. You know, it is what it is, but, you know, but then after the game, oh, we were wrong.
But the thing is, I mean, at the professional level, I'm not so sure at the high school, college level, but professional, I mean, you can't even question the officials.
And you know what?
I mean, they're insulated.
But you can't question them in the high school level either, because if you start, you know, voicing your opinion about, hey, you missed that call, blah, blah, they're looking at you like, hey, and they threaten to give you a flag. You know, they're going to penalize you if you are challenging them verbally. You know,
but I don't like post-game commentary.
Oh yeah, but you know, but the funny part is, and if you do say something about it post-game, in the pros and college, you get fined. And you know, and if you say something post-game in high school, they're just going to get you later. But I'm telling you, I've researched this, and my sport's all about film. And I met with officials, and I said, how is this call being made? And I didn't even understand the mechanics of, you know, officiating. And then when the head official came to my house and we watched the film, it was always the same two guys. And you know what? As I said, I don't think you can be that bad on accident.
Well, I don't know. I readily admit to having a green and gold bias when it comes to watching high school sports. Mm-hmm. And there are times when I feel that sometimes the officiating doesn't go our way, the New London way, and it gives me reason to wonder, you know, what's motivating some of the calls or lack of calls or consistency of calls. You know, it's one thing with officiating. I mean, you may not like balls and strikes of an umpire, but if he's always calling it out here 2 inches off the plate, well, you know 2 inches off the plate's a strike, you got to swing. Right. It's not like it's here for this guy and it's not for the other guy. That's I think you know, you want consistency with the officials, that they're calling things the same on both sides.
Yeah, you know, and this, I know one of the things that we're always told to us prior to a game is, look, you know, everybody says just hold it on every play. But if a guy's holding, if your right tackle's holding and you're running to the left, we're not going to call that. And don't you know, you get in the game, and they're calling it. And it's like, and I understand a lot of times you're going to officiate the scoreboard. And I had been fortunate enough to be with a lot of teams that were really good And as we know, the whole Corcoran rule and all that stuff. So, I mean, we won the game 90-0. We won the game 77-0. You know, we had a game stopped at halftime because we were winning, what was it, 51-2. And that was after both teams had to take intentional safety. So it was like a mockery. I got that. But the point is, you know, you see these things and you say, you don't need to officiate the scoreboard. Officiate the game. And as I said about, you know, if you're really looking to manipulate things, you don't even have to change the outcome. You just have to change the spread. Mm-hmm. And if we think there aren't spreads on everything, you know, we're crazy. But as I told my wife when I left, I said, I'm probably going to say something controversial tonight. So there you go.
Well, you know, listen, we dip into this and that each and every time you're on, and you know, I know that the as things evolve, mm-hmm. and they do, and as the older we get, we reminisce about the way things were. I mean, I look fondly back of playing high school football back mm-hmm. in the. For me, it was in the late '60s, early '70s. I mean, that. You know, in those days, you couldn't use your hands when you were blocking. You had to keep your hands tight in here, and period. I mean, if you had your hand out here or your arm, you get flagged just for having it out there, even if there was nobody there. But as a coach, you've got to kind of suck it up, and these are the rules now. And this is the way we got to go. Kind of like with baseball and free agency years ago. You know, I mean, for better or worse, a guy who played it well in the early years was George Steinbrenner. If you like the Yankees, you don't, but he bought a lot of good players, right. Had good teams. And if you want to compete, this is what you got to do. You know, I went to see a Mitchell College basketball game this season, playing St. Joe's of West Hartford, mm-hmm. coached by Glenn Miller, former Fitch player, UConn player, Northeastern. And he's got a powerhouse, Miller. I mean, a nationally ranked quality team. And they pummeled Mitchell. And Mitchell's in this new conference. Right. And Todd Peretz, who has sat in this chair where you are 2 or 3 times, you know, now he knows if he's going to be competing in this league, he's got to get players. Right. He can be the best coach, but if you don't have players, he's going to get pummeled next year too, and the year after. He's got to. What's he going to do to compete? And I don't know. I haven't had the chance to ask him that question yet. But I mean, it was.
Well, I know this.
I use that as an example.
Yeah, I know this. I'm a better driver when I have a better car, and so, you know, and I speak for myself. My first year as head coach, we're 9-1, make the playoffs. My second year as head coach, we're 4-6. We didn't forget how to coach, but you know, our senior leadership graduated. The kids who came up to be seniors didn't take it seriously, didn't want to get in the weight room, and you win during the off season. And I look back on it and I thought about it. I coached at New London High School for 13 seasons, so that means our first season, these kids would have been 5 years old. And they watched New London pummel people every Friday. Well, first on Saturdays, then every Friday night. So they thought, hey, you just put on a uniform, you win. We're New London. Now, 13 years later, when those 5-year-olds or 18-year-olds, they thought, just show up. And that's not the case. You've got to put the work in. And when the players are good and they're doing exceptional stuff, now don't get me wrong, good coaching, you should be able to steal some games, do whatever, but in the end, if you want to be what New London wants to be, which is champions, then you have to have players and you need good coaching. And it's funny, and the other thing you need, and this is huge, and people don't want to think about this, money. If you look at the state champions in football over the years, you had teams with great running backs, phenomenal athletes who would get out there and you're running toss right, toss left, you play some defense, you win a state championship. Now all of a sudden, you have 7-on-7 camps. You have camps, I mean, I know like, schools, and again, I don't want to misspeak, but I think New Canaan has 2 coaching staffs, one for the season, one for the off season. So they're not breaking ACI, AC rules. We're not working with our players, but they're coaching their kids year round. New Canaan would take their entire team to a camp in Alabama where they're able to practice and all that stuff.
And that's in a very affluent community.
Right, to say the least. Whereas, New London, and I'm not defending or attacking the coach at that time, but if we deal with our kids during the off season, it's a violation. And people get jammed up and coaches are getting fired for stuff like that. But you know what? But if we go to America's game when they had it, that's okay. Another town. And they're practicing too, they're doing all that stuff. We just don't have that. So money talks, but I'm going back to football. So these passing camps, these quarterbacks throw so many passes on time. And the rules are now even working where you can do the RPOs and all that stuff. It's almost impossible to play defense. And if you're not able to get a kid to go out there and do that all the time and throw, that clock's in his head. And you've seen, it went from the New Londons, the New Britons, to now it's the, New Canaans, the Greenwiches, who are the teams with the most money.
Yeah.
And,
Well, I know that.
right.
I had the gal who's the president of the Whaler Gridiron Club, Holly McCalla, in as a guest a couple of months ago, and she speaks strongly on the need for New London to that the club to raise funds for this purpose to get these kids to these camps, because otherwise it's not going to happen.
Hey, I'll tell you one thing. I've learned a lot of good things from coaches that I was an assistant of, and I learned some bad things from them that I would never want to emulate. But one thing I learned from Jack Corcoran was you can outwork your opponent. And when I became head coach, it was like I was an up-and-coming rapper. I was selling any and everything I could. I was selling the old jerseys. I was making T-shirts, hats, bumper stickers, anything. And we raised a good amount of money. And we were able to go to the central camp. And you know what? And every time we went to a central camp, as an assistant coach or as a head coach, we always had someone get offered a scholarship. That means you go there not knowing if you're going to afford school, and you leave there knowing you got a full ride. That's huge. That changes the life of a young person, and their family doesn't have to worry about paying for stuff. And, so there's no doubt that the money is an important thing. And one of the things I thought of, obviously watching A.J. Dillon play for Green Bay, and obviously our traditional uniforms being Green Bay Packer uniforms, Green Bay owns the Packers.
It's a municipally owned
Right.
team.
They own them. I would love to see New London do that. Imagine this. If every person in this town gave $1, we'd have $36,000 for a football team. $36,000. And I speak football, other sports would say, hey, what about us? But I'm just saying, if that was one of the things that I didn't get to, I had an abbreviated head coaching stint. I didn't see it coming. I thought I'd be there forever. And then the love of a father, I want to see my kids play college sports. It bums me out for a couple kids who were right on that verge of getting that scholarship, and then I left. But I can't regret being there and enjoying the time with my children. But again, think about that. Every person, it's $1. 36 grand. There's like 36,000 people in New London. There you go. And so coaches, go out there. Somebody do that. But I was going door to door. I started one end of Montauk and worked my way down. I started one end of Coleman. You just have to outwork some people sometimes. Yeah, it's nice to write a letter, but when you get there, my poor wife, there were probably multiple OBGYNs who thought my wife was going to transfer to their office. Because I went in there like, oh yeah, and they'd walk out with a check for $100.
Yep.
And it was like, yeah, oh yeah, my wife, yeah. She has no idea unless she's watching now. I was promising her to every doctor that could, but it's just whatever you got to do to get these things done within the rules, and that's just, I'm willing to walk down the street and do that. And then you get great supporters on the waterfront, the Schiavone family. They donated meals to our program for the entire 13 years that I was there, and then some after, and then they restarted it last season. Never charged a dime. Never asked for anything. And all they asked for is, hey, come in sometimes. And after every victory, guess where we were? We were there, and we had a lot of victories, so there's a lot of great times there. And Anthony Schiavone is one of my favorite former players, and just in texting with them, and you're talking about staying in touch with kids. As a coach, trying to help them, I still want to try to help them. I try to help them now. If I can help them find a job, I share my, evangelism with them because I want them to be, in a right spiritual situation.
You want to have good, productive members of society.
Yeah, but you know what?
And whatever that may be.
Yeah, and there's a bigger picture where even if you're not a good, productive part of society, you can still be right with the Lord. I know people don't like to hear that. Religion doesn't like to hear that, and I'm not going to beat on my drum with that, but everyone's not going to do it right. But all of our kids don't do it right. There are going to be kids who don't do things the right way, but you don't stop loving them. And if we as parents can do that, I think God can do that too.
Well,
but I know religion makes it like you got to be perfect, and that's not the case.
Well, I think religion basically is there because we are not going to do it right. Nobody's going to do it right all the time.
Right. And my thing is, I'm very anti-religion, but I'm very pro the Bible, what it says. And again, I respect that people don't have to agree with that, but it's not a matter of, I'm not smart enough to figure it all out. Anything that you said about me tonight and my successes and all that, the grace of God. Because if I did it all my way, I'm a little nutty, and I know that. I'm quick-tempered at times. But I've learned that, that's not the way you need to do business, and I tried not to do it that way. But that's what made me an athlete, I was competitive. And in the end, sometimes it's just certain things click.
Well, one thing I wanted to ask you, after doing your undergraduate work at Central Connecticut, state school, public institution, and then having your 3 children going to some pretty high-powered academic institutions, 2 boys at Yale and your daughter at NYU, right?
Fordham. Yep.
I get those 2 confused.
That's okay.
I just know they're in New York.
Yeah, and you are right about that.
Is that as you've gone through life, do you see a discernible difference between the opportunities that coming out of Central Connecticut versus, let's say, going to the Ivy of New Haven or into the Big Apple? Here last weekend, I had a chance to spend some time with you and with some of your old buddies that you went to school with and played ball with, and here it is a day or 2.
Yeah.
And you guys still have that connection. So, which I thought was, fabulous, in that you also, these guys show up at social events that you hosted at home. So it's, as they say, it's not what you know, who you know.
Right. Well, when I first moved back to New London, Carrie and I, my wife, had a picnic from my 6 roommates from college. We lived 7 of us in a house that should have been condemned. And it just seemed to grow from there, and like 35 years later or whatever it is. Well, no, we've been together for 33 years, so 31 years later, we're still having that picnic. But now instead of having 6 guys showing up, we'll have 50 guys show up. And anyone that played with me, or that I coached at Central, I coached for a season. So from my freshman year up to my coaching down, so there's a bunch of guys in there. So I got about 140 of my college teammates and coaches in my phone the same way I have about 120 former high school players in my phone. I think it's just important that we stay in touch. And as you said about the big difference, Central guys will want to help Central guys out, but Yale guys can really help each other out. And as you know, our younger son, Major, was close to playing professional football, and he blew his Achilles tendon out. So a little more than 6 months ago. And he's been networking, you know, and just talking to people from Yale, getting feelers out, trying to find a job. And, you know, he had to wait a long time until he could actually walk again, but he's in that process now. And that's a huge difference. As you said, it's who you know. And some of the guys I know can definitely get you to a happy hour, but the guys from Yale can get you jobs. And the same thing with Fordham, you know, Spencer was talking about for homecoming. Spencer came home this past weekend with her two roommates from Manhattan, and they were talking about, because they all went to Fordham, and they were talking about their homecoming and being on a yacht somewhere. And I'm like, okay, you know, when I was at Central Connecticut, you know, it was like I was dating a young lady who had done some travel in her life, and she's like, oh, this is Paris, and this is Greece. And I'm like, yeah, this is Ocean Beach, and this is the roller skating ring in Groton. You know, that was my worldview.
Yep.
So it definitely, as great as it is, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I love my college buddies and teammates, but the connections at those schools are ridiculous. Spencer went to the Gabelli School of Business at Fordham, and the boys, you know, besides playing football there and being in their secret societies and all that stuff, it's pretty impressive.
Oh, it's amazing. I'm hoping before Major gets that job and ends up someplace else, that I'll have him sitting here and I can discuss with him his life experiences and goals and objectives. And so
Well,
I bring it up to him when I see him, but I haven't been able to make it happen yet.
yeah, Mage is definitely our laid back of the three, most sensitive, I would say, of the three. Just phenomenal athlete, just the nicest person you're ever going to meet. You know, just who he is, but he doesn't try to get into the limelight a lot. Hunter and Spencer are a little more outgoing, and you know, but all three are doing great things. And even though Major's recovering, he's still got such great promise. And that's, you know, Hunter said something to me. We were in our basement the day that they announced that Casey wasn't going to play football anymore at UConn because of concussions. Hunter looked at me and said, if I can never play football again, I want to be at Yale versus somewhere else. And you know what? He made a good decision. His senior year comes around. Joe Lenta, who was an agent at the time for Joe Flacco, who was the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. His representative calls me and says, we like your son as an outside linebacker. We want to talk to him. Hunter had tore his labrum preseason, but wanted to finish the season, so he didn't have surgery. So I call him up, son, you know, I'm like, they want to talk to you. This is great. You know, you might get a shot. He's like, Dad, I could barely lift my arm right now. He says, after the Harvard game on Saturday, I'm having surgery that Monday morning. I'm all done with football. And he says, and I'm going to put this Yale degree to the test. And Hunter's doing very well for himself right now, living in Dallas, Texas, working for Cisco Technology or Cisco Systems. But he put that Yale degree to the test.
Well, you've got three terrific young adults, that's for sure. You and your wife should be, and I know are exceptionally proud. And
Well,
should be.
I appreciate it. I don't like using the word proud because that's like a reflection back on something I achieved. As I said, it's the grace of God. And quite honestly, if anything, my wife was willing to stay home for 8 years. So as a school teacher with her kids for 8 years at home, these kids were so far advanced when they went to school. You know, I remember coming home from work and her sitting Hunter on my lap saying, oh, read this book to Daddy. And I'm saying, he can't read. And he read the book to me. And I was like, okay, you know, and his third grade teacher said, this kid's an Ivy League student. And that's why I say I'm not smart enough, because I was like, I want him to go to Miami, you know, play football scholarship. And then when he did get his first offer from Boston College, it was like, that's cool. But I remember saying, because he said to me, Dad, you know, it's going to cost a lot of money if I go to Yale and this and that. And I said, son, we're going to have to trust the good Lord. And I said, people are doing things their entire lives to get their kids into schools like Yale. And now Yale's recruiting you. You got to go. And, you know, then later on we find out they're doing everything to get their kids in, you know, illegally and everything else. But, yeah, you know, it's just my wife staying home. And again, you know, our income was going down, but we were living better because of the quality of the situation. So it worked out great.
Just as a change of pace regarding the, we had chatted about this before, because I enjoy attending Ivy League athletic events, whether it's football, basketball, ice hockey, and I wish that more folks would take advantage of going to a Yale or any of the Ivy League football games. I mean, you got Yale Bowl holds 60,000 people, and you know, except for the Harvard game every other year, you know, if they get 10,000 people in there, it's a pretty big crowd.
Right.
And you know, once upon a time, they used to fill that place. And I don't know if they'll ever recapture that, or if Yale will ever, or the Ivy League itself, with the changing dynamics with these movement of players,
Right.
if they will ever change, or if they're just going to stay as they are. I mean, the Ivy League has stayed put with all these conference changes.
Yes, they have.
Haven't brought anybody in, but they haven't lost anybody.
Well, you know, I mean, to get that degree is special. And we'll see what it is. I mean, there is definitely a era of we are the Ivy League and we're not going to change for other folks. But I will say this, I think any area should utilize their facilities to connect with their communities. We're in a town, we have 3 schools. I've gone to Mitchell College games, you know, and it's like, I've been to a college women's game, and we should fill these places with New London kids. If you have an empty seat, why don't we have elementary school kids there? You know, you were so generous to take myself, Tommy, and Chop to the Army game last season. It's a beautiful place. It's unbelievable. But when you think West Point, you think Army. You think Annapolis, you think Navy. Are people thinking, you know, when they hear New London, are they thinking Coast Guard? I don't know.
I don't think so.
But my thing is, Coast Guard, they're a wrestling team. I met the wrestling coaches. They're great guys. They just won the regional championship. They set the most. They had the most points ever in the tournament. They're sending guys to the nationals. I know they have one guy ranked number 2 in the nation. We should know about that. It bothers me that I didn't know who John Ellis was. I had his baseball card in my hand, and if I was smart enough, I'd turn it over and see New London, Connecticut, but I didn't. And this is a guy who's playing for the New York Yankees. I remember what the card looks like, but it was just another card. Oh. You know, you should be able to walk through New London High School and not know who people are. And for a long time, that was the case. They've done a good job now of getting jerseys up and things of that nature and the plaques displayed. But I just think we can have a better connection between these schools and our local kids.
I mean, look at Conn College a few seasons ago. Their soccer team was Division III national champs. Who knows that in New London?
Right, but at the same time, invite New London soccer in, and let them run around with your national champions. Bring New London wrestling in and let them run around and roll around with your guys. It's a great PR move, if nothing else. And then maybe all of a sudden the kid goes, maybe I can go to college and do this. Because as I told you, until I got a letter, I didn't think about going to college. So I just think we can do things to spark young people's interest.
I think, between the 3 schools, and you've also got, UConn Avery Point across the river. Right. And for some kids, and this is one of the things I know, with discussions I've had over the course of many, many years with Jimmy O'Neill, who he's a big advocate regarding athletics at the high school level. in that with some kids, it's the only thing that keeps them in school. Not necessarily that that's the best thing, but it may be the best thing, if that makes any sense.
Right, right, right.
If
No, I
it
understand
takes getting them to play whatever sport it may be into school, at least you're giving them a chance as opposed to having them drop out.
Right. Well, but I would say this. You mentioned earlier about having, strong families and parental support. A lot of our kids don't have that. And being a great athlete should not be a license to be a jackass. And unfortunately, at times that happens. Got to be held to, instead of giving them a special set of rules, they maybe should have even higher standards. Because, my college teammate's son was the leading rusher in the nation at Monmouth College the past 2 seasons. Declared for the draft, just went to the combine, a kid named Jaden Sheridan. He's going out to dinner with the 49ers and the Commanders this week. How's he going to behave there? Everything he does now is evaluated. How are you eating? What are your manners like? These are the things. How are you speaking? What words are you using when you speak? And we have to set a standard, and we have to have kids come to that standard instead of lowering our standard, instead of not keeping people accountable, not being disciplinarians. Yeah. Kids will do what you let them do.
Well, absolutely. And you can't, you do a disservice to the kid when you enable them.
Exactly. And the kids don't get it. They think, oh yeah, you're cool, you're the person that's helping me out. You're not helping them out. And it bothers me greatly if you're already established, you already have a career, you already have your house and your cars and stuff. These kids need that. So they need to be disciplined.
I concur. Well, you know what? As happens every time you show up, the hour just whistles by here. Well, and we have concluded our time here on City Focus. Once again, we'll have to have you back. I always enjoy having you in for a lively chat about whatever we decide we're going to talk about. So
all right.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, boy.
When you see your son, let him know that I'm still want to get him
all right.
sitting in the guest chair.
I will tell him.
And see if we can make that happen, because I got a feeling once he gets employed here, he's going to be hard to corral there. If he's even in the area, he's liable to be hither and yon. He could be in some big urban area.
Yeah, that's what he's looking at. But we'll see. But if he's on here, the ratings will go up. He's a heartthrob. All righty.
All right, Juan, thank you. Folks, you've been watching City Focus. We'll see you again next week. Good night.